Kaneda Tsukamura. I started off. Eventually payment had been decided and Hiromi looked pretty happy about everything, even if I had to nudge her and remind her about the friendship discount. With that, Hayato had left having other things she had to do, and left the gig to us. We were officially on the job. Rebecca had arrived after a while looking pissed at first, but as soon as she found out what we were doing she had laughed and lost most of her irritated frown. I guess flatlining a gonk brought a smile to her face too. "What do we know about him?" Malcolm asked, getting to the real point. "Not much. But we know where his house is, and I don't think he has any girlfriends, or kids, considering he is trying to get with Hayato." "Wait. This guy is trying to. Holy shit." Malcolm whispered and Hiromi looked confused about the whole thing before I just shrugged. "It's not relevant except that he'll likely be alone, but that's part of the problem. Client wants this to be noticeable. So I think I'll check out his home now. If he is home, then we can track him somewhere. If not, then we just wait for him to come home and do the same thing. I figure we stake out the garage of his building, place a tracker on his car." I said, looking to Malcolm for that, and he nodded. "Great idea. Then we just follow him to somewhere busy. Goal is to make his death very poignant. Rebecca, I'm not sure how much shooting we will do, but I'll probably rely on you as part of my escape plan, okay?" "Hair. Sure, I'll cover you strings," she said with a smile that I quickly returned. Ichi and Hiromi will be our exits, with Malcolm as cover as well. But I don't want to overplan yet. So let's go find this gonk's house and sneak around. "Hell yeah." Rebecca cheered. Well, Kaneda is a wealthy guy. I spoke over the line that everyone was connected to, not that they didn't already see that. "No kidding. That's a hell of a building," Ichi added. I was looking straight up the very ritzy skyscraper, from the rear loading dock. It was funny how often I infiltrated apartment buildings from the rear, but it really was useful. I could easily move a camera into not looking at me, and electronic locks were meant to keep out drunk, or high gangoons, or street kids. The security simply wasn't capable of stopping a real netrunner. I left the others in the alleyway. I would code them into the garage area, but first I needed to infiltrate in. As soon as I was inside the small back door I shuffled out of sight. There was a hallway leading straight from the front entrance beside the teller desk to the back door. It was also thankfully where the elevators were, but that wasn't what I was looking for. I slipped across the hall and into the door that had an employee-only sign. It was thankfully empty, first leading to a small storage room, which I noticed was full of supplies the front desk would need, including extra security shards for new renters, but I wanted all access. I slipped into another small security door, finding the small security room running along. I flopped into the seat, and started breaching. "Okay, you'll all have garage access, get down there." I heard some returning confirmation as I worked the system. They would find someplace close to the entrance and keep an eye out for our target. My goal was uploading a picture of the target. I added, and then went on to search the camera records to see if I could find if he was here. No, I shook that desire off, and placed an access shard into the system in a slot, and then hurried back out of the security room. While my netrunning instincts told me to stick to the security center, ninjutsu reminded me that keeping control wasn't the goal. I had access to what I needed, now I needed to get out before someone noticed. Slipping back out the way I came, I continued to work through my agent, before just walking to the already opening elevator and walking inside. The door shut instantly, and started taking me up. From there I accessed the camera system again as I waited and found my target. Kaneda left his apartment this morning. He's driving a yellow Xion. Sending a picture. I uploaded it to our network and then smirked as the elevator opened to his floor. I didn't whistle, but I was tempted, as I walked down the hall. Mostly to keep anyone from wanting to check out who was whistling. He wasn't a penthouse gonk, But his apartment was definitely the more expensive units. The entire place reminded me of June and I's apartment. It was clean and had a certain level of expense in the flooring and walls. His door slipped open without hesitation as I approached, and I walked in and ducked to the side, in his little nook he had set up to drop off shoes. I started scanning. Had to make sure whatever security he had himself wouldn't catch me. Rebecca. Damn, she's fast. Rebecca muttered as they headed into the garage. Malcolm asked as he looked up from checking his gun. The two of them were stuck in the back of Itchy's truck, the two HMGs ready for their use if they needed. Sasha, the runner that Maine uses? She's good, and likely would have gotten access just as fast. But only with prep beforehand. I've never seen her actually sneak into a place without prepping the place first. Malcolm was quiet for a minute before he nodded. Yeah, I guess it is kinda weird. Motoko is really good at sneaking around though. Has she popped up behind you yet? No, yeah, she does that. You'll be hanging out and all of a sudden you'll have her hand on your shoulder or she'll crack a joke right behind you. What a bitch. Rebecca said, laughing, and Malcolm smiled along with her. These kids were so weird. The lack of constant ego trips was pretty intense. That she was the oldest out of all of them, even if she was the shortest, also meant they treated her differently. Sure, Itchy and Malcolm both had done the teenaged boy thing and checked her out, but Rebecca was fine with that, and wasn't really interested. Neither of them were really her type. Which was a shame, cause finding a cute merc boy was harder than you'd expect. Most of them were jerks. Like Pillar. Fucking Pillar. She was still pissed at him. How dare he say that shit? That she was playing with kiddie shit, and she'd never make it onto Maine's crew if she didn't stop playing. Agitated, she rolled her legs, as she grit her teeth. Swapping what leg she was holding herself up with as she flashed back to her brother's stupid fucking mocking voice. Saying she would never amount to anything again. Well, not in so many words, but she knew that's what he meant. Just because she fucked up a few gigs by being late. Or that time she saved that stupid sad puppy-eyed gonk, even though they were supposed to flatline him. Hey, you Nova? Malcolm asked, and she almost lashed out at him, but there was a weird culture with Motoko's crew. They didn't do that shit. Teasing was always light, and often if Motoko did go too far she'd apologize after, which was fucking weird. I'm just dealing with shit. She decided. And so sitting here without anything to do is shit. Ah, gotcha. Why don't we step out then? There's some food places out of the garage. Aren't we supposed to be keeping watch? Malcolm looked at the nearly closed truck rear door that he was sitting nearly flat enough to look out. Can't see much from here. Itchy and Hiromi are still on duty, and we are just waiting for the guy to show up. She hesitated before shrugging. Sure, I could use a bite. Cool. I think there was a bucker slice down the block. Gross, I'm not eating that slop. I think I saw a Carbions. I guess that'll work. Hold up, let me ask if anyone wants anything, he said before his eyes flashed yellow. Hey, Choom's gonna go on a snack run, Carbions looks like. You want anything? Rebecca relaxed when nothing disparaging came through. Just a few requests, then to her surprise Motoko cut in two. Ramen if they have anything good? I'm in the mood for some noodles. Sure. I'll look, Malcolm said with a roll of his eyes. Motoko always wants noodles. She'll offer other things, but don't ever offer a ramen place, or that's what she'll jump on. Good to know, Rebecca said, then she couldn't help but laugh at the silliness of it all. They took this work seriously, but they weren't. Uptight? No, it was more that with Maine everything had to be done like the big guy wanted. Everything was meant to make them look like edgerunners. Section 9, for all they dressed up in armor and high-end equipment, was so much calmer about it. Ah well. Fuck Pillar. She hopped out with her much smaller legs and put her hands behind the back of her head as she followed Malcolm out of the garage and onto the street. Just a bit more, and she'd have the eddies for her chrome. The problem with stakeouts is that they were boring. I was currently watching Canada's TV while slurping my ramen bowl that Malcolm had delivered. I had sneaked a peek at the cameras and noticed my chums had all set up a cute little picnic in the back of Itchy's truck as well. Once more changing the channel, I sighed as there was nothing on. Canada's apartment was now completely subverted. Not that he had much. Just a security system on a separate system from the main buildings. Slurping up the last bit of broth, I sighed. Waiting around for people was so boring. Since my meal was finished, I went ahead and dumped it into a trash can that wouldn't be noticed if he returned, turned the TV back to the channel it was on, and switched it back off. With a soft leap, I climbed into the space I had found that was perfect to hide in. Pretty sure it wasn't supposed to be there, but the guy had definitely had an entranceway modified when he moved in to have a small area to take off shoes and things, but it had left an empty space above that entranceway. So I climbed up there, and laid flat staring at a ceiling in boredom. I idly switched between some programming that I was tinkering with and checking all the cameras as I waited. A long time passed and I was definitely bored when finally I got a message. Yellow Xion just pulled in. Itchy's voice was excited and I checked the cameras. Well, hello there, Canada. Once he is clear, place the tracker. I reminded them and got a few affirmatives from my chums as Canada came up to his apartment. I watched through the cameras as he slumped in, grumbling about something under his breath. He threw his jacket over a chair, grabbed some food from his fridge and threw it in his microwave. It would be stupidly easy to kill him right now. Unfortunately, client wishes come first. Hayato wanted his death to be public. So I waited as he made himself a meal and settled on the couch for a while. Finally something happened. He got a call. I quickly hacked in and listened. What is it? Canada demanded, and I noticed the call ID registered the call coming from Hiko. Nothing big, boss, but we had an issue with the delivery. Some product is missing again, Kuso. I told you to keep an eye on it. I did. You have my word, I did. I think the product is going missing upstream. I swear I've been with the package from when it was delivered until we opened it. Fine. Keep an eye on it, and get the camera records ready. I want proof it wasn't us. I'll go talk to Moritaka-sama. I blinked at the very familiar name, and then felt myself smile. Oh, this was an opportunity. Canada got up and got ready, grabbing his jacket and keys. Slowly he put back on his shoes, and I grinned at what was happening. He's coming down. Everyone get ready, we're going to leave first and follow. I called out, already knowing exactly how to get ahead of him. He left the apartment, and I slipped off the hidden area and waited at the door for the elevator to come. I had actually called up both elevators, and when he stepped inside, once the door closed, I was out and moving. The second elevator opened and I was inside, the doors closing and sending me down to the garage as Canada's elevator made a few extra stops. Once out, I raced across and leapt into the back of Itchy's van, which closed just after me. Motoko? Just got great news, Malcolm. Canada is about to go visit an old friend, one that I would very much like to make a point to. I said with a grin as the truck started up and pulled out. The sound of a Xion engine starting up behind us meant it was right behind us as we started out of the garage, and then he was gone, but easily tracked. We tracked him just a few blocks away to some business that was definitely owned by the TC. Plenty of people going in and out meant it was impossible for me to just stride in through the entrance. Got it. It's an upscale bar, second floor is VIP seating. Hiromi added into the comm, and I grinned. While it wasn't anything I couldn't have gathered from a bit of net running, Hiromi was much faster at getting basic information about a building or business. Second floor, huh? I glanced up from a ways down the street and took in something interesting. That was a mighty large window you had there. A quick scan told me it wasn't bulletproof. Okay. I know how this is going to go. I said aloud and looked to my chums who were all sitting around the back of the van looking around just like I was, and with a smile I told them my plan. I waltzed inside without any hint of fear. The bar was upscale, all metals and glass. The sort of place that I didn't really enjoy, but no one stopped me. Why would they? I walked in and glanced up. The VIP area was a second-floor ring that ran around the sides of the building, leaving a large space they could look down onto the people below. I already knew where everyone was, and I knew where my target was standing. A camera was pointing right at him, and with the ping I had on him, I had his position. I had a katana on my hip, the same one that Musashi's gangoons had tried to kill me with. I had pulled it out of the quadra as I called my car for an update to my armory. This was meant to be loud, but it was meant to be a statement. I still had my professional pride. Quick and clean, and very poignant. I stepped forward a few steps and loosened up my shoulders. I lowered myself and leapt. The second floor was well within my reach, as I leapt up and grabbed onto the guard rail and threw myself over. I activated my Sandevistan to make sure everything went smoothly, and as I landed I could already see people sitting around the boss Murataka rising up in shock reaching for weapons. None of which would fire, but my target was too slow. My katana was unsheathed and before he could turn, before anyone could shout a warning, I was there. Kaneda Tsukamura gasped, a weak-sounding wheeze as my katana slipped in, cutting through his heart, and with a gentle move I made sure to cut his spine quite badly, even as I let my momentum carry me on as I pushed him straight forward until I simply stopped, letting my katana slide out of his back as he slammed face first into the glass and out. The crash shattered an entire pane and glass splattered all around me, but through the whole thing my eyes were locked onto Murataka Kuwabara. I held my dripping katana even as my eyes remained locked onto the man. Just to let him know I had seen him. I didn't move. This wasn't just a statement for Hayato, but one for me too. Gangoons stood up and raised weapons that clicked or simply refused to fire. I gave it long enough for the realization set in, and then I finished what I was here for. With a gentle sweep I completed a chiburi. A blood shake. Murataka flinched at the motion, and then I sheathed my blade. Hayato Nakagawa sends her regards. I finished and I saw the flinch through the crowd as I simply turned. The massive glass window was now open and clear and I stepped out. Ichi had pulled the truck up as the glass shattered and I stepped off, basically onto his truck, as he started driving off. Kaneda Tsukamura is dead. I sent the text to Hayato. Gig complete. Hayato wanted to meet up for the completion of the gig. So rather than party, or split up, we all headed across Japantown back to the expensive high-rise where the TC bosses had their meeting. Taking the elevator up with the entire crew was interesting. I could feel the tension ratcheting up from Hiromi and Ichi, while Malcolm was more calm, and Rebecca was expecting trouble, and seemingly happy to pull her gun. The door opened to the same hallway and as we stepped out the TC guards in suits seemed to make a call, and before we reached security Hayato was there stepping back through dressed up as fancy as I had ever seen her. Motoko? Hey Hayato. I greeted back as I pulled up the net gogs from my eyes. I was still mostly fully kitted out, just the helmet left behind. She took a moment to look over me, and the rest of my chums before seemingly smiling instead of looking uncomfortable. Good, you will make an impression, she said and made to turn away but I coughed grabbing her attention. You didn't tell me why we were here? When I told father I was responsible for Kaneda's death, he wanted to speak to me. You are here as I explain my actions, and prove to father that I am not without my own assistance now. She told me and I quirked an eyebrow. It was as Hayato moved forward, and we were about to go through security when a strong hand clamped down on my arm. I followed the pretty chrome fingers to Hiromi who was looking as jittery as I had ever seen from her. Motoko? Yeah Hiromi? Is that Hayato Nakagawa? I confirmed looking at her, and then watching as Hiromi just stilled and obviously short-circuited. Hayato N Naka, Naka. Why didn't you tell me? She suddenly came to and started hissing in a whisper as she grabbed me and shook me harshly. It didn't really come up. It's the heir to the tigers. The tiger princess. Hayato Nakagawa II. And you. Hiromi backed away and started rubbing her face. Did she finally figure it out? Malcolm asked, and Hiromi stilled as she turned to him at his words. You knew? Yeah, she introduced herself. You weren't there yet though. Itchy. I owe you 20 eddies. Malcolm called out as Itchy was disarming to get through security. Nice. BB but. Don't worry about it, Hiromi. I said, deciding to take a bit of action. Hayato is a friend, and so we are going to just treat her normally. She's our client right now, so that's that. Yes, but I didn't know. Well, you do now. I laughed and guided her forward, watching the rest of my chums hand over their guns and weapons. Soon we were through and into the large meeting room. I noticed it was much emptier than before, but some of the people sitting in the front were people I recognized from the last time, as well as another familiar face. Hey Wakako. I greeted reflexively, and she turned and gave me a look before nodding. Motoko. Everything went well, no further bloodshed than what was expected. She asked me loud enough that everyone was looking towards us. But I had no shame. Tisk. I offered her in turn, actually still annoyed. As per your instructions. Murataka is someone I can't target, as much as I might like to finish that loose end. He's still alive, and I'm a professional. No one else besides the target was touched. See? Wakako said, turning to a bald man covered in tattoos beside her. The girl is competent, and does not allow foolish things to interfere in her professionalism. As you say, mother. I blinked because the big tatted-out TC guy didn't look anything like tiny Wakako, but then again that fit as well. Hayato did her own fake cough and glared at me, and I noticed that while I had wandered off to see Wakako, she had gathered the rest of my chums behind her. Nodding, I waved goodbye at Wakako and headed over, earning a particularly amused scoff from the woman. Try to stay close. Hayato whispered to me, and I nodded apologetically. Then suddenly, as if a switch flipped, everyone stopped talking and in came Shinobu Nakagawa. Hayato's dad, and the leader of the TC. Which was still weird to think about. He entered without a word and took his seat, and instantly got down to business. Hayato. You had Kaneda Tsukamura killed. I did. She said without hesitation. Confident as she offered a bow in her kimono. Yukata? Okay, seriously, one of these days I was going to have to spend a few minutes and learn which was which. Explain. He responded instantly with a bit of harshness. While you were fond of Tsukamura the elder, his son is not the same man. She argued instantly, and I watched as she straightened her back and continued. The power went to the boy's head. He spoke words that should not be spoken. That he would be the fourth shinobu. She offered, and there was actually a flinch among the room at her words. You have proof? I do, recordings of him saying it to his soldiers while they played. It was his intention to marry me, and attempt a takeover. The room was quiet, and then the man looked at Wakako with an upraised eyebrow. Don't look at me. Hayato came to me requesting an assassin, and I provided. I am simply here to see the after effects. She offered as catty as ever, and then continued to watch over the proceedings. Mother-in-law. Shinobu started wearily before shaking his head. Please do not give Hayato access to an assassin. The old man actually pleaded. I did nothing. Hayato created her own contact, I simply reminded her of the fact. Wakako denied any wrongdoing with a smirk. The girl. Kusanagi is one of your mercs, yes, but the meeting between Hayato and her was not my doing, and was actually a pleasant surprise. Motoko is rough around the edges, but is a professional within Hayato's peer group. It's good for them both to meet and create connections. Wow, that was almost a compliment from Wakiko. Auto-sama. You called me here to discuss why I had Canada removed. I have. And this evidence wasn't given directly to me because? He asked back with a glare, and Hayato almost wilted, before firming up. Because, I am Hayato Nakagawa, and I can handle business for the family as well. The older man sighed, rubbing at his salt and pepper temples that once more made me stare at his face. He was crazy handsome, and it was cruel that he was like an evil gang boss. Then again, he was probably crazy handsome because of all the eddies he had because he was an evil gang boss. Then the evidence for Canada's death will be handed over. Unless mother-in-law has already? It's real. I confirmed it myself. Wakiko offered, and the men around the room all frowned, looking pissed. Yeah, I guess if some early 20s gonk went around saying he was going to marry the daughter of the leader, kill the leader and become the next one, and I was one of those leaders already, I'd be pissed too. Then the assassination will be condoned. Forgive me, old friend. Nakagawa whispered aloud, and many of the men bent their heads. Sukumura's pops must have been important. It seems you have an assassin on hand, Hayato. Make sure to use such a thing sparingly. The old man added, and Hayato practically buzzed. I will take that into consideration, Auto-sama. But I will not hesitate to call upon skilled mercenaries when needed. Papa Nakagawa sighed again at Hayato's words, and I had a feeling she might be using her newfound freedom and connection to an assassin to remove a few more people. Which was nothing but an awesome thing in my book. Wah, I can't believe we were just standing in front of Shinobu Nakagawa. Ichi whispered once we had left the building proper and stepped into the garage. Nerve-wracking. Malcolm agreed, but he stretched and seemed less bothered. I'm just glad we got out of there. Talk about tense. Rebecca added as well, before slapping Ichi on the back. And don't think I didn't notice you practically shivering as you stood there in your armor. I didn't. I have a contact with Hayato Nakagawa. Hiromi whispered as she followed robotically behind us all. She had been doing that since she had worked up the nerve to speak to Hayato on the way down and mention she was the one in charge of setting of gigs. So Hayato. How'd we do? I asked. She had followed us down and seemed set on speaking to me about something but having difficulty beginning. You were perfect. Grandmother will ensure word gets around that you were operating under my orders, so no one will cause any issues for you. I'm more irritated that more people are going to know what I'm capable of. I hate people that don't underestimate me. It's so much easier when they think I'm just a brat. You will be known as working under me personally. That will do a lot for your rep. Isn't that a good thing? 50-50. It means I have a better chance of being known while doing something, which is good or bad. Being able to intimidate is useful. But being unknown or underestimated is often better in my view. But it's nothing to worry about. I continued on when I noticed her frowning. It was inevitable, and getting known as working for you is a good thing. It means the tigers should be less of an issue in the future. Are we often an issue? She asked me with an honest curiosity in her voice. I would expect, with your brother and legacy status. You should be treated well? Not really. I offered back. Jun's rep helped, yeah, but most Tiger Claw guys at the bottom are jerks and don't really think before speaking. I looked back and saw her frowning. That is not how it should be. They should have nothing but respect for you, since your parents and brother were tigers. In a perfect world. I replied back with a smirk, saying obviously that the world wasn't perfect. Besides, I know my way around a blade and more. Indeed you do. Hayato confirmed, actually smiling, which was a rare sight on the serious girl's face. I will have to face you with Shinai again next time we spar. If you were able to stand against Komorebi, then you were holding out on me. She said, suddenly going on the attack and pushing at my shoulder with a finger, but that didn't do much thanks to my chrome. Hey! I wasn't. Not really. I had 2 blades when I faced him and I'm good at dual wielding. I'm ambidextrous. Tisk. I will test that myself. She argued back and I just laughed at her eagerness for more spars. Then we stopped. We had wandered off a ways farther from the rest of the group, as I let Hayato guide us, and it seems we were far enough. Hayato? Motoko, you did a favor for me that I will not forget. Freeing me from that filth Canada. It's not like I did it entirely altruistically. I explained, but she shook her head. You did it when I had no one else to do so. And grandmother has already denied me her own contacts for this business. I was stuck attempting to find my own. I will owe John Sensei much for letting us meet. Well, glad I could help. I know. Which is why I feel cruel for speaking further. I need to solidify my place in the Tigers. I am a daughter, and while we are not Yakuza, few would see me rise up to be the next Shinobu. I blinked because I thought Shinobu was his name? It was a title? Never mind, I decided I would ask Ichi later or something so that Hayato didn't start trying to slap me again. You need more help. I would like to continue our relationship. As client and mercenary. Hayato confirmed, sounding very official. I don't mind. I decided. If you need someone killed, rescued, something torched, or just a big gun fight, you know how to reach me. Maybe we'll talk to Hiromi to set up some for a retainer. Is that a thing? Hayato looked very pleased for half a moment, her smile bright and happy before she instantly shifted back to her official face. I look forward to your future performance. She spoke and I shivered because I had a moment where I felt like I was working an actual job instead of doing whatever the hell I wanted. Sure. I offered, deciding that was the correct response, and she nodded. Unfortunately, Hayato needed to head back up, so once she was gone I jumped into Ichi's truck and we all took off. Time to celebrate. Woo. Rebecca cheered as she showed off with her Ajax. I had intended on going to Lizzie's or something, but Ichi had made a good argument. It wasn't a good idea to party at Mox HQ after doing work for the Tigers. Even if it had been an assassination of one of them. So instead we were out at Turbo's of all places. Rebecca had suggested it, and since we didn't really have a hangout that wasn't just go home, or Lizzie's, I had no reason to argue. It turned out to be a good idea in the end. Ichi and Malcolm both quickly fell in love with the attention, as Rebecca was a familiar enough face since this is where Maine celebrated. She was able to start the process of a party. As everyone gathered around as Rebecca regaled them of the most recent gig. With lots of extra bits added on. I certainly don't recall her gunning down the security guards, for instance. But I guess that was half the fun of being a merc. The tall tales. I blinked surprised as I noticed Hiromi walk over to the Turbo's little attendant, and not long after come out with a few packs of bros, she walked over to Rebecca. Hell yeah. Free booze for everyone. Rebecca cried out and everyone cheered as the crowd Rebecca had gathered turned into an actual party. I didn't expect that. I told Hiromi as she wandered over and sat on the seat beside me. A small cost for a post-gig party, she said confidently, and then stilled a bit and sent me an honest smile. Rebecca suggested it. Apparently if you turn this sort of thing into an open party it helps with your rep. Tomorrow everyone here will be talking about the cool merc party the night before and telling everyone what we did. I nodded at her explanation. I guess that all made sense. For a group of mercs, normally their rep was their guarantee, their hope of future work depended on it. I was just so weird, and we had built up enough of a nest egg thanks to the helpful contributions of Scavs and Raffen that I never worried about where the next chunk of eddies would come. Do you or the boys worry about eddies? Like, do we make enough? I asked, and Hiromi hummed. Not recently. There was Ichi's thing with his grandmother, but since we got the big truck, his morning job has paid out well. Hiromi mentioned I could see the way she was looking through me that she was doing calculations in her head. Before all this happened, I wanted all of us to have a meeting. I mentioned, and Hiromi blinked at my words and nodded at the memory. That's right. Anything in particular? Us, our future. I mentioned as I stared off. What our relationship will be like in a few years. I glanced over and Hiromi looked super red. Before I could ask her what's wrong, she spoke. Are you sure it's tea time for that? Are we ready? She stuttered and I laughed a little and nudged her. Section 9 has grown so much already. I think it's time we start formalizing things. It's nothing to worry about. I explained, looking over at Malcolm, who was actually seeming to get some attention as he held a brosve in one hand and talked about some adventure he had. Section 9. Of course. Right. The future of Section 9. That future. I asked and Hiromi shook her head wildly and then ran a hand over her face. Right. That makes sense. We've been growing a lot. The Behemoth. The Minotaur. Rebecca joining more full-time. I'm glad she wants to work with us, I said as I turned to look where she was. Rebecca was throwing her weapon, grabbing it and throwing a mag into the rifle, looking pretty cool while she did so. You never did tell me why you wanted her to work with us so much. She's admitted that she's barely got any experience with her current crew, but you threw her into a solo position. I just know she has it in her. I admitted, purposefully not meeting Hiromi's eyes. Plus we needed more people. I had met her, and I knew I could steal her away from Maine and his crew. She's also a lot older than us. She's pretty. Mature. I don't know of anyone that's ever called that gremlin mature before. I whispered back and Hiromi snorted and slapped my shoulder. Don't call her a gremlin. I say it like I see it. But yeah. Rebecca is cool, and I think she's perfect to balance us out. A bit older, but that's not a bad thing, even if she doesn't look it, which sort of ruins the chances of her doing any infiltration we can't handle because of our age. I'll just have to dress up again. Dress up? Hiromi asked, and I realized I fucked up. Nothing important. I think it is. Hiromi argued with a grin, and I was quick to jump off the bench and make a run for it, Hiromi right behind me shouting for answers.